Fairy Tail is beyond awful. I have been a long time hater of Fairy Tail for a while, and I have my reasons for it. There will be spoilers, so beware.
P.S. I'm here too. And while I don't say I hate Fairy Tail, there is a lot wrong with it, and I'm here to share my opinions too.
Fairy Tail has plenty of things bad. For one, let's start at the top. The story. The story for Fairy Tail is filled with useless, bland archetypes that don't provide anything new. Immediately we're thrown into arcs like the Galuna Island arc, where the people are all demons. This arc progresses nothing into the plot and has no relevance to the story. Side arcs usually have relevance in the smallest way. They should lead somewhere. In Hunter x Hunter 2011, we have the Hunter exam arc, an arc that introduces the main characters, an anti-villain, and goes hand in hand with the story. It clearly has relevance as it leads to a mini arc where they add Killua onto the team.
This arc also establishes things that become relevant later on. This arc introduces Netero, an old man who has a lot of bearing on the Chimera Ant arc, is a big figurehead in the world, and this arc actually hints at Nen, from the way characters like Netero and Hisoka are so strong. Come to think of it, we really wouldn't have a story without this arc, and how it builds the premise of the show.
Or how about the Heaven's Arena arc, that introduced Nen and showed us all the nitty gritty on how even the most broken powers can be broken down to the rules of Nen. Even when they had arcs that weren't necessarily relevant, there were good story arcs that were interesting, such as the Greed Island arc, or even the Chimera Ant arc. In Fairy Tail, this isn't the case. The Daedalus arc was filled with boring egg seeds and other stupidness. The arc was relatively long and felt useless. The next few arcs like the Grand Magic games came up, making it feel as if Daedalus had no reason of existing, until much later on. Even then, the Daedalus arc only brought in Lysana, Panther Lily, and finally Mystigan. Only Mystigan was really relevant, and the others became background decorations. For an arc that's 19 episodes long, this is not big enough or even entertaining enough to add in only one truly important character. Not only that, but the Grand Magic games were completely useless and boring. Oh look, another tournament arc. I'm sure that'll be super entertaining. After each of these arcs, it feels like you watched all that just to get back to square one. I mean, lots of the arc happened as a result of Zeref. Zeref was the one who controlled Mystigan to make him wake up from his slumber, but he wasn't sleeping, so what controlled him? Are you telling me that Mystigan really did it because of Zeref? That would only further everything I said because they react to the problem. They essentially wait for the problem to come to them, so that they can react, solve it, and go back to the status quo. Everything is useless and comes back to the status quo.
The status quo in Fairy Tail is a big problem within the series. Hero cannot be fucked to change it in any sort of way. No one really dies in Fairy Tail. And when I mean no one really dies, I mean there are some small deaths here and there, but none of the main cast dies. This takes away so much attention during certain fights. Even when you think something will change, it never does. Even when Hero is jerking us off with amazing fights, there's no climax, there's no death, there's no impact. And in the end, we just get blue balls. The biggest dick tease in my opinion was during the last arc in the manga, the Alvarez arc. Makarov uses a spell that's supposed to kill him when he uses it, and he remains quote-unquote dead for a good portion of the next couple of chapters. His death affecting Erza, Wendy, and many others. However, he eventually wakes up, saying he slept for a long time. There is no reason as to why Hero wrote it this way. You'd think in the last arc, Hero would actually kill off a main character and make their sacrifice meaningful, but there is nothing respectable about this. Mako doesn't even do anything after this. There is literally no point in reviving him, except maybe to get the award for the most bullshit anime comeback of all time. You're either just being a bullshit storyteller and not giving us any explanation why Makarov became Jesus and came back to life, or you're saying everyone on Fairy Tail is a fucking moron and can't be bothered to check if an old ass man is actually breathing or not.
This status quo reaction goes on for many years just so Hiro Mashima can lengthen the material and profit off of it, whereas arcs in Hunter x Hunter that aren't necessarily relevant make some development even in the slightest. In the Greed Island arc, we leave with information to a friend of Ging. This ties in with the next arc and makes development in the story. It makes Gon that much closer to his dad, even if there's much more to go through. Arcs in Fairy Tail never have development on Natsu or his goals of finding his dad. Although similar in how both main characters are trying to find their dads, Hunter x Hunter does it better.
Yeah, because at least Gon tries looking for his dad. Natsu doesn't even try to look for his dad, and instead goofs off and fucks around for a little bit until Igneo finally shows up. At least in One Piece, when there's a sort of goof-off arc, like say, Thriller Bark for example. Thriller Bark doesn't really have a lot of bearing on the actual goal of fighting the One Piece. However, this arc introduces Brook, one of the main crew members of the Straw Hat Pirates, and ties back to the beginning of the Grand Line, where we met the Laboon. It introduces the villain, Gecko Moria, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. At the end of Luffy's fight with him, Luffy's bandaged the fuck up, and Gecko Moria tells Luffy that he can't go into the New World because it's so dangerous. This in turn is a good lead into the arcs after this one, where Luffy actually loses and gets his ass handed to him a lot of the time. Sorry for talking so much. It's easier to explain why an arc of a series can be fun and distract from the main goal, while still having relevance for the plot of the series.
Agreed. Other than the bland irrelevant arcs that make up the most of Fairy Tail, the story also has arcs that are very formulaic. There's a team of villains, our main characters split up, our main characters defeat the side villains with relative ease, the elites come together to defeat the main villain, it somehow devolves into a one-on-one battle with Natsu and the villain, friendship talk, and Natsu wins. This is evident in the Tower of Heaven arc, Battle of Fairy Tail arc, and Eurasian Sace arc. It's always meant to make Natsu great and shows the audience that Natsu is a Nakama man. If friendship is such a deep theme for Fairy Tail, maybe they could differentiate it. Perhaps, the friend of our protagonist can be a bad guy, which would perplex and challenge the audience since it deals with morale. It might even change it up a little. I get paid to storyboard this. I don't rewrite it. This leads to my next point. Even though everything is the same, nothing is said about it. This is obviously because Fairy Tail is to garner attention and sell instead of being material that challenges the viewers. This is seen in how they elongate every arc into being painfully long. It's also meant to keep the average watcher watching as long as possible, hence the gargantuan amount of fan service. Which, if you watch it for fan service, there are other things you can watch. You know what? Never mind. Fanservice is a major mood killer that is used to fix the fans immediately. The battle with Natsu and Lucy facing Kane was an exemplification of this. It goes from a gimmicky, jovial fight to a forced, heartwarming moment that wasn't settled into, and then a huge spike to a light-hearted emotion when Lucy suddenly hits Kane because of Natsu. Like seriously, watch this. Absolutely no transition. The scene with Happy trying to attack Kane is left with a cartoony, comic relief sound, making it still seem happy. And the next shot is serious with Natsu pleading for Lucy to run away. Then we have a little bit of intimacy, albeit forced. But still, some intimacy. You might say that the scene with Natsu making the silly face was a transition, but it's not. The same shot shows him struggling after just shouting at Kane for hurting Lucy. You would think it'd go from a serious to a blank state to jokes, to make it not so jarring. But you can see here, this is the full shot. A huge sudden change in this so-called transition leads to lol XD jokes. Not even that, but this is more personal. The jokes previously weren't really much of jokes, but instead were fan service hidden as jokes. Lucy striking poses while having that face was still supposed to look sexual, since she was in suggestive modeling positions. This ruined the pacing of the fight and just generally was used for a huge portion of the battle. Although it mostly has useless arcs to guide the story, it does have an overarching plot. Natsu's goals are to fight his father, Igneo. That's why we're watching it. To follow his adventures and finding his dad. In the beginning, it felt like he was truly finding a way to find his dad. But they let it go immediately. Anime like Full Metal Alchemist have goals like Ed and Al getting their bodies back, and showed them actually going about ways to do that. They want to find ways to get their bodies, and they actually go along with their plans to advance and achieve their goals. Natsu, however, not so much. Igneo in the manga even dies, making his goals disappear. And when he did, nothing really changed. Fairy Tail had quickly evolved from Natsu finding his dad, to Fairy Tail goofing around and saving the world time and time again. But let's say that instead, the main plot is defeating Zeref and putting an end to his evil antics. Zeref doesn't die. Period. Good night, y'all. As Level said, Fairy Tail's fake outs are annoying. While people say that death isn't needed to make an anime good, shonen anime often carry them to increase the stakes, to remind viewers that there is plenty more dangers that await them. This is a major spoiler for Hunter x Hunter in the Chimera Ant arc, so there will be a timestamp on the screen if you want to avoid it. I definitely warn you if you haven't watched it, because this will spoil the beginning of a great arc. Kite dies. This leads to a major fear stricken into the viewer. We had just met this character and felt a bit attached to him. We had a profile, character background. He has that specific quirk with his Nen powers. You know, the one where he's always dissatisfied with the weapon his crazy slots chooses. He was cold but caring. You liked him. He was pretty cool. A strong side character to aid and teach our main characters. This impressive character that we just met, a student of the legendary possibly non-existent Ging, killed by
Neferpitu.
Don't be a weeb.
It's also well noted in the older anime of Hunter x Hunter, and in the manga, we are introduced to Kite very early on, which makes it all the more sad and impactful when he dies. We also see how this affects Gon, making him very angry and vengeful. Going back to the Makarov part in the manga, as stated, we see characters like Erza and Wendy crying, and Axe is actually having a somber moment over the death of their guildmaster, only to have every small aspect of that scene taken away when it's revealed Makarov is alive. When you do a fake out like this, it isn't cute, it isn't heartwarming, it isn't good writing, it's just lazy. Who are you trying to please by this? Certainly not the fans. Characters like Natsu or Gajeel I can understand, but Makarov? Seriously, who out there legitimately says he's their favorite character? Plus, even if you do kill a beloved character, kill them with grace. Make their death mean something. Ace, Neji, Vegeta during the Majin Buu arc, all of these deaths mean something because they were beloved characters and they died in pretty great ways.
Fairy Tail never has that danger, the danger of death. When it does, it tricks you, except not really. Like seriously, this has happened to Gray, Gajeel, Juvia, Lisana sorta, Makarov, Mirajane. Why? How can you still like it? The dangers of the battle has fallen. This ruins the pacing since it just used pages up for nothing, retracts the character development after seeming to develop after the death, ruins the tension since everyone knows now that no one will ever die, and finally makes death have little consequences. What's the problem with dying if Wendy can just save you like she did for Juvia? It ruins all of the battles, all of the tension, all of the character development, and is used for shock factor, which it falls in also. If you're gonna shock someone, don't use the same trick over and over again. So let's talk about the battles. The battles of Fairy Tail have far too many spectators that comment on very small things. While this is good in explaining things, it's not all that good in watching it. It thinks you're not smart enough to capture attention and comprehend what you just saw. They had a whole arc with spectators just so that they could explain basic things. Another issue is the magic system in Fairy Tail. What determines your power? How come some people don't have powers? Where does this circle go in later arcs? What relevance does this circle have other than indicating magic? How come some people are stronger with their emotions? These answers never show up in the anime or manga, and you're just supposed to accept it. I've mentioned Hunter x Hunter and its Nen, so I'd like to mention how an anime should do it. Look at Fairy Tail's magic page. The overview goes over some logic of the magic, but doesn't contain any notes. There are 2 notes on the same paragraph, so where is this note for this major portion of magic? You're telling me the only thing that explains magic doesn't have a reference? Why? Not only that, but look at Fairy Tail's magic page and compare that to Hunter x Hunter's Nen page. They have a considerable amount of notes that demolishes Fairy Tail's magic page. Another issue I have with the battles in Fairy Tail is that they carry little weight. This is often because Mashima doesn't make a proper build-up and just gets into the fights. Hunter x Hunter took its sweet time to really show us Gon's rage, but Fairy Tail has very little of that. Look at the fight with Natsu and Zero. A small build-up of the villain, and we're immediately thrown into a large portion of the fight. Fairy Tail's battles have no emphasis to it. There's nothing much on the line, no real stakes. An example of Fairy Tail's battles having little meaning is a fight with Jalal. Natsu had the opportunity to leave with Erza, but he didn't. Why, you might ask? because he got in a fight with Jalal for making Urza cry. You might say that Natsu was doing it to save the world or whatever, but that doesn't seem to align with his personality. And if you really want to give the fairy tale anime the benefit of the doubt, Natsu should be fighting over Urza's feelings instead of the world, since it's much more personal. But you must agree, it's just stupid. It just seems to have much less of a meaning and can't be taken seriously. It's manipulative and robbing you of real emotion. I felt this exact way towards Levi being crucified. She was never really shown to have any significance, and despite being a member of Fairy Tail, she was just another character. But the swooning music and enraged Natsu was supposed to make us feel something. Once again, manipulation. Or how about that whole Sting's cat thing? Boo hoo hoo. The majority of these battles are bad jokes, fan service, super quick pacing, a magic system not explained, often low stakes, and manipulation. While it may seem petty to talk about overpowered characters, it is undeniable when it comes to Fairy Tail. Have you ever noticed that no one stands up to Fairy Tail? No one stands a ghost of a chance. Not Aracian Sace, Lamia Scale, Grimoire Heart, Sabretooth, Tartarus. Natsu vs Sting and Rogue is a perfect example. There are two legitimate Dragon Slayers, raised by dragons. For some reason, the show calls them 3rd generation, but they are 1st generation Dragon Slayers. Yet they don't stand a chance against Natsu. There's no reason for it, it's just because he's that strong. I haven't talked about the one-hit knockouts, but boy, just know I haven't forgot about it. Natsu vs Vanish Brothers, Natsu vs Yuka and Toby, Natsu vs Erigor. Want newer examples? Natsu vs Sting and Rogue, Panther Lily vs Nappa, Gray vs Sugar Boy, Urza vs Jenny. Look, I can go on forever. That's not even mentioning ass-pull magic like Eunice and Raid, which was used only a handful of times. Also, Juvia's Water Make. The best magic she has arguably is used once and is versatile. I understand not using Water Make Blood, but base Water Make is actually really good. How come she never used it? Because it was never developed. It was an ass pull, nothing more.
Let's not also forget the fact that a lot of the time, fights in fairy tales aren't won because of strategy or training. Mostly friendship power-ups, or friendship speeches, or just generic power-ups. After the first time skip during the Grand Magic Games, Natsu doesn't even train or anything. He just gets Yoltear to give him some magic shit on him, and suddenly he's stronger. What? You have so much content you could have filled there, but you choose not to do it. Why? Because it takes too long and you can't be fucked to give us a good training montage?
So after bashing the fights, what can I bash next? The time skips. I'll save the idea for another video, but the main point is that the time skip ruins the pacing. After a time skip, you feel as if everything has been renewed, and the progress has stopped temporarily. This is proof in how time skips often tell you how the character has developed off screen. It gives you a brief catch up with the characters so you feel readjusted to the time. The year-long time skip was bad, but I could turn an eye to it. The 7-year time skip, however, was awful. The series claims that nothing much happened, which would just ruin the pacing because we have nothing to catch up on. There's an aftermath from the 7 years, with Fairy Tail and Lucy's dad dying, but it's just them catching up. It makes it seem forced emotionally for the viewers. Let's say that everyone gets weaker because they didn't train in all that time. That would be even worse. They're essentially making us start from a previous point to make them catch up. Fans have told me that it was about Fairy Tail to go up in rank since their fall, and for Fairy Tail to get stronger. That would logically make us believe that Fairy Tail's elites have faltered since their slumber. I can talk about this a lot, but I have strong opinions of time skips that I'll get to someday. Just know that time skips are bad, and Fairy Tail's time skips are even worse. Now let's talk about some plot holes. According to the Fairy Tail Wiki, or Fairy Tail Chapter 276, after a Dragon Slayer reaches an advanced level, he or she suffers from severe motion sickness. Natsu is shown to have motion sickness since episode 1, and Gajeel develops this as he becomes advanced later on. This would mean that Natsu was at an advanced level, and Gajeel wasn't when he was bad. So why did he have so much trouble with Gajeel? Why did Future Rogue make Rogue try to kill Gajeel? Future Rogue also says that Fairy Tail would win and that Sting would surrender. So if Rogue was successful in killing Gajeel, his foresight would have been wrong. What did Ivan do to get excommunicated by his dad? His dad, Makarov, is the same guy who accepted a villain after beating his kids. So his son must have done lots bad. Is Makarov to blame for Ivan's wrongs? And finally, What is wrong with everyone in Fairy Tail? Friends are more of their family than actual family. Lucy's dad is shown to be awful for little reason, and Makarov's son has done sinful acts. It's just stupid. There are a whole bunch more you can see in the description below. This is just touching the tip of the iceberg.
Oh gods, yeah. The plot holes keep on coming. Especially during the final arc of the manga, would you believe? What happened to Brandish and all the other members of the Spring and 12? How did Makarov survive that magical attack and somehow come back to life? What the hell did Natsu and Gillarts talk about during chapter 417? Who's the next guild master? What the hell was Gillarts doing while he was away? What became of Aquarius? Did Lucy ever go and get her? Instead of all this bullshit about shipping and about children, I feel like we should have been asking Hiro some questions.
I'd like to get your attention on some lazy directing. This sounds a little nitpicky, but I promise it's not. The opening scene starts with clouds moving away in a basic and old patterned way. I don't understand why they made it so unfitting and basic. It doesn't match with anything later on. I swear I'm not a Hunter x Hunter fanboy, but even though the 2011 version came like 2 years after, I think it did it better. It shows us a magical orb and a whole bunch of people trying to grasp it, but they can't. This is followed with an appropriate screen shatter transition to the people who have attained this magic. We're supposed to view them as vital because the screen shatters to make us look at them now. Our eyes were forced to look at them. These people are actual characters we see early on. We're unsure of their abilities and just assume them to be strong people. They're shrouded in darkness, but they have a backlight which gives us an outline of them, because our eyes go from filling in the black to making a white outline for the silhouette. Before that, our eyes might look at the Hunter exam logo in the background because of the bright red radiating from it. The Hunter exam logo is pushed to the back because it's a foundation for all the hunters in the foreground. Your eyes basically go from background to foreground, or your eyes are like mine and go from foreground to background when the logo starts to shine. I think the picture is more extroverted because of its details and framing. Fairy Tail instead has silhouettes of random people who we never see. When do we actually see a wizard with a wizard hat and a staff? Never. This is to get your attention lazily by making you legitimately think about old school wizards before altering that image. The map of Fior is something I won't give credit to either. There are mountains before we see a certain building reminiscent to the one on the map, before we see Fairy Tail. This map seems to match with Happy Flying, but there are some issues. Sure, we see the mountains, the building, and Fairy Tail, but look onwards and you see the obvious issue. There is no body of water in the way we see it, and if you look for ways to construct a path that is consistent to Happy Flying, it doesn't combat the statement that there needs to be mountains after the body of water. Can you actually be good at being a Hunter x Hunter Dragon Ball Z One Piece ripoff? You have the plot of Hunter x Hunter, the character dynamics of Dragon Ball Z, and One Piece. One Piece!
Speaking of One Piece, didn't you know that Hiro kind of takes inspiration from One Piece? I'm serious. You can tell in story ideas that Hiro looked at One Piece and was like, hey, let me give someone a... Because one of the first arcs, the Galuna Island arc, is very similar in structure to One Piece. The crew finds an island, explores its culture, finds that there's some bad guy, and finds that there was some bad shit about a main character's past, where there's a parental figure who passes away, therefore shaping how the character feels. This structure is very similar to One Piece, and although Hiro gets better at making his own thing later on, it's still weird to think about the similarities.
Similarities, you say? I'm sure you were expecting us to talk about Hiro borrowing character designs from One Piece. Early Fairy Tail art looks as if Hiro stole a base from One Piece and added onto it. The art style of early Fairy Tail has a very One Piece feel. Hadai and Kuma, Gildart and Shanks, there are plenty more, but I thought I should at least mention it. Some dude on Mal said that Fairy Tail was similar to DBZ and had some fair observations. I won't be regurgitating what he said, but you can find it in the description. Nonetheless, it's been accepted by fans that he's gotten inspiration from other works. While this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it sure is distracting. If I could tell you the amount of times I've called Gildart's Shanks. Mashima reuses his old designs too, making it very confusing on his fans. He reuses Plu and basically Jalal, Ethereon, the Jigglebutt gang. I'd argue that the design is just cheap and lazy. It gives Fairy Tail a feeling of wanting to be like One Piece, and not wanting any individuality. He reuses ideas and reuses character designs to make people have better connections with the characters despite not knowing them. He makes sure all of the women of Fairy Tail have big breasts so he can extort it in a way to be fan service. Nowhere is this more prevalent than the torture Kyoka gives to Urza. She, Presumably the only independent woman is reduced to nothing more than superficial assets. The reuse of character designs, fan service bending character designs, pretty much everything the character design bring up is to make money and use the viewer. It doesn't make it stand out in the slightest. This is to combat statements that say it's doing something new or doing any form of subversion.
One thing I will say that I do like about Fairy Tail are specifically the villains. You want to know why the villains are the best characters? Because it's like half of them become good guys. Vegeta is the best example of this, and is the most developed character in the series in my opinion. He starts out as a lackey, a pretty much throwaway villain, but he slowly, and I mean slowly, starts getting along with people, which is what I kind of like. He starts one way and ends another. Sadly, I can't say a whole lot for all the other characters, but I can say they do change slightly. Characters like Natsu, Lucy, Juvia, Gray, and Erza, they stay pretty stagnant, but they have slight changes. Although there is a lot of characters in this huge cast, and a lot of them get overlooked, there is some good characters in the series if you take the time to look. There's also an opposing side to this, and there are some characters that become worse over time, Jalal being the best example. In the beginning, Jalal had a backstory, and although his mind was corrupted, he wanted freedom to protect the people he grew up with. As the series goes on, especially during the Alvarez arc, he basically only becomes Erza's love candy. He has little personality, except being there for Erza and being ship fodder for Erza. He only does like one heroic thing, and that's about it. What wasted potential, honestly.
I'll agree on Gajio, but aside from him, I've not seen any major changes to constitute as a character development. I think everyone but the villains who've seen the light aren't really changed, and even then it feels more like a character rewrite instead. They've changed so drastically, it's almost as if they're not the same person. How do you go from Zodiac Killer to Priest? Look at Jalal, he's just completely good. He said he wasn't under Zeref's control and acted alone. He destroyed a whole bunch of orphans' home, abused and almost killed a close friend, and then changed into a love can stop hate guy. I can only point to Gajul as being the same and actually progressing. If, in an anime that has a huge cast, you can only point to a handful of characters that develop, I don't think you're watching something good. To touch on what Level said, no. The villains are all sadistic, smiling, and completely stuck in a misguided but not really stasis. They're all the same.
To comment on that, I want the villains to become good guys or decent characters. The villains in general are still shit for the most part. They either have no motivation, little motivation, or it's just plain forced.
I want to talk about the Fairy Tail opening scene one more time, and I promise I'll say something different. I've put this under an animation error instead of a directing error, since a camera would have done it correctly. Look at the scene again. Do you see anything wrong with it? The mountains. Now if you don't know, this doesn't follow the depth of field. This is a large depth of field because it focuses on defining features such as the cities below Happy and Happy himself. But as the mountains are out of the range of focus, it should blur because it's what's natural for a camera. But this is an animation, you might be thinking. To this I have a relatively quick punch. The whole of the segment is using direction that's been used in film, so why should this specific segment be exempt from it? There's also the fact that it has a narrator with a bold voice, and generally seems cinematic because of how grandiose it is. You cannot refute the fact that there is a clear issue. Here, let me show you. There's also some parts where it's clearly copy and paste animation and just looks funny. There is a footage with Lisana jogging, and according to the background, she's moving at a lightning speed with copy-paste animation. There are also a few continuity errors, like Gildart's gloves and Lisana's guild mark, but those errors are few and far between. People claim the animation is great because they have all these cool Easter egg creatures and point them out, but the ones mentioned are relatively easy to spot for my eyes. I'm not some kind of freak that watches things frame by frame. Also, look at this awful animation that was taken frame by frame to really show you some errors.
2 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. I like good pussy and I like good trees. Smoke so much weed you wouldn't believe, and I get more ass than a toilet seat. 3 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. I met a bad bitch last night in the D. Let me tell you how I made her leave with me. conversation and Hennessy. I've been to the motherfucking mountaintop, heard motherfuckers talk, seen them drop. If I ain't got a weapon, I'ma pick up a rock, and when I bust your ass, I'm gonna continue to rock. Get your ass on the wall with your 2 left feet. It's real easy, just follow the beat. Don't let that fine girl pass you by. Look real close, cause strobe lights about to have.
My main gripe with the animation comes from 2014 Fairy Tail. Episode 181, Lily vs. Neppa. Lily decides to hide behind a rock and Neppa sees him, because he did it right in front of his eyes. Neppa decides to use his acid move and then Lily appears behind him. Like, how did he get there? And it's not like he used other rocks to hide and jump. No, he was at the apex of his jump, meaning he did it from when the acid was going on. Did Neppa use that move and not pay attention to Lily's reaction? Did he see Lily and decide to move when he attacked to make it look cool? Look at the strike by Lily. What was that? I understand that this scene is supposed to make it feel like we got back to square one since we're back to seeing Neppa's back, but then they decide to refute what we just established by having Lily attack from behind again and miss. It's taking that whole DBZ logic where Goku thinks to himself, if I do this again but hit him harder, it won't work. I think that's a workable excuse for DBZ's battles as well. I'd argue that the original Fairy Tail didn't have as much derps as 2014. Characters in the background look like they're constipated from how poorly they're drawn. Look, I can talk about the animation for days on end, so let's just put the segment to the end and accept my clearly superior opinion. While the music of Fairy Tail is memorable and relatively good, the other things aren't so good. For one, the dub. Let me show you some clips released by Funimation to just display some great audio.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
Oh, does this belong to you?
Yeah, no, give it back.
Not gonna happen.
Many comments say that these are unmixed and therefore should be exempt from criticism until you hear the mixed version. But even after that, listen to the take.
Not gonna happen.
Now, does this sound like a strong take? Of course not. The voice actor sounds like he's afraid of letting himself go. In fact, hearing the dub of Fairy Tail, you feel a certain sadness that you wouldn't in the sub. Natsu is clearly the best because Todd Habercorn, of course, but just listen to the background characters and it's just straight up sad. It had so much potential. Todd did such a great voice act and made Natsu have this little Irish voice that fit the aesthetic, but it's blown by how sad this is. Also, listen to this sound design. This sound effect is used in so many anime, and is a recognizable sound effect in anime in general, like as common as a Wilhelm scream in cinema. In fact, many sound effects used on other mainstream anime are used in Fairy Tail. It doesn't even have much of a real sound design. There is no real foley. You know how GoldenEye 007 had that specific gun sound effect that Shadow the Hedgehog also has? It's in a whole bunch of films and games. Well, think that way towards Fairy Tail now. It has a sad sound design. Speaking of sad, although we had a good time, I'm sadly going to have to end it off here. I think I said more than enough mentioning how the story in Hunter x Hunter did better, the battles and how they're mostly low stake and have a magic system not explained, the characters and how mostly everyone has little to no development, lazy directing, bad animation, bad sound design and awful dub. Look, we had our fun. I can talk some more about Fairy Tail, but I'd rather do away with something I care so little yet so much about. I mean, from this video, I think you can tell I care about Fairy Tail more than Mashima. Also, huge thanks to Level for working with me on this video. You can find his channel here or in the description down below.